Emotions in our hearts, shit what us in our balls. The spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest the cerebral.
Gonna try something different today. How's it going? How's it going, sir?
It's all right, man. How are you doing?
Not bad. Not bad.
Pretty aggressive imagery today here.
The
That's
blue
good.
axe hovering above with the hand, the resolute grip. And
Yeah.
you're looking nice in that fresh shirt over there. It's
Yeah.
that's a nice.
Yeah,
That's a
it's
blue,
new
right? That's
shirt.
a light baby blue type thing going on.
Yeah, it's a baby blue. It's a baby blue. It is a new shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to you before we started, and it is one of the many new shirts that I have in my closet that I haven't worn yet.
Nice. Nice.
Shout out to the missus. So
The missus. Indeed. So I think I'm going to play a little intro thing here. So just kind of starting out casually looking into the chat here, seeing that Greg O and D are in the house. Shout out to the early bird squad, I guess is what is called. And I will shamelessly and uncreatively, boringly copy what they say. And but let's add a little length to the splash of the intro there, and we'll be back. We'll come and we'll talk about how to cut them off, ladies and gentlemen.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what was behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make me get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the interdimensional, five-dimensional warp drive with Ike Ogamin and Captain Dr.
Let's go.
Aha, aha. Thunder indeed, the written taking over the spoken, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to get ish done as it is our want to do over here. And you see, last time we scouted, we looked out there and we spotted the enemies of progress, right? So now that you spot them, now what, Dr. Thunder? What you gonna do with them? What are you gonna do with them? You went out there, squirreling through the bushes, right? You, you were on the hunt, you were on the prowl. You had your camouflage on, you spotted them, in different ways, you identified what they do and who they are and the various flavors that they have, the enemies of your progress, if you will. So what are you gonna do, Dr. Thunder? Now what?
Well, that's actually a picture of me behind us. I'm I'm on the hunt. Um no, well, I mean, you don't actually have to look around for very long to figure out who are the folks that are going to hold you back. Uh, some of which they may have a particular agenda to do so, but many of which their sort of upbringing or uh, were aspects of insecurity are actually what is causing them to be a hindrance in somewhat of a sort of there's the ball and chain analogy. Now that's usually used when people are talking about marriage and assuming their marriage to someone that is not carrying their own weight and not adding anything meaningful. But I'm using ball and chain to symbolize someone that um, is attached to you in a way that makes it hard for you to go as fast and as far as you need to go to accomplish your goals. Once you've located that person, then cutting them off is the thing to do. But how do you cut them off?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
That's
mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm.
that's the
So
challenge.
let's just kind of go about it in the typical systematic way that we tend to go about things here, right? Or maybe I'm just saying that. Is there a typical systematic way by which we go about things over here? Or no, I don't know about. I guess let's find out again. Yet again, ladies and gentlemen, we are finding out live by asking this question, as in what exactly is cutting off, right? So let me start by saying this. I will call it compartmentalizing people based on trust and function. This adds certain dimensions to it. However, low resolution still, right? But it goes away from just cutting off to, okay, now we're saying compartmentalizing. Okay, I kind of get that point. Okay, you have people who are in the inner core of the family, right? More trusted and also have certain functions. And then there are people on the outside, they're the neighbors and so on and so forth. You have people whom can contact you on LinkedIn, but it's not appropriate for them to contact you on Facebook. And they can contact you on Facebook, but not so much Instagram. And maybe Instagram, but not your text, right? But these people are just contacting you by digital means. It's still the same text, but LinkedIn is a few removes from your text, right? So these are compartments and they're based on trust now will be an important ingredient and also function, right? So trust is an important aspect in terms of this holding you back because we talked about all the different ways in which people can hold you back by not being teachers or inspirers or having value or working with you side by side, sweat equity wise, and so on and so forth, all the way through to people whom have a blame mechanism kind of mindset, what's the you know the phrase I'm looking for. But if we talk about compartmentalizing these people, okay, I think that begins to kind of paint more of a picture of what the task is, right? Rather than just cut off, compartmentalize based on trust and function. Where do we go from there? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I like some of the nuance you're providing there. So especially like, okay, so we all have all of these different social media platforms, and then different access points. And who do you want to be able to have easy access to you, and who do you want to have to sort of go through a particular process to be able to access you? You know, you get on. So if I was to go to someone's website, for instance, say an artist website, um, and if the artist has a big enough following, then they're going to have a few different sort of portals by which to access them. And by accessing them, I don't really mean accessing them at all. I mean getting in touch with the people that do stuff for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're sort of handlers. So there may be a booking agent, maybe a uh, goodness, could be a manager, could be someone that is in charge of scheduling media uh, interviews, could be, you know, could be a portal that puts you on a mailing list, an emailing list, could be a sort of general form in on a page on their website that says, okay, you put your email address here, and here are the 8 or 9 different, you know, topics that you can email me on, or
Mm-hmm.
separate portals or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for some artists, all of that stuff exists, but really everything is just going to them. Now, that still provides a particular kind of buffer. And the buffer that it provides is that you still think that you haven't directly reached them. So then they don't have to respond to you as if
Mm-hmm.
you directly reached them, even though you did.
Yeah.
Right.
And you could respond even immediately. Let's say you were, let's say what one way you can handle it is by, okay, I don't have to actually respond on time. But even if you responded on time and you're responding now as the clerk, right? Or the person that puts together this list or whatever, right? It's all coming to you, the artist, right? You're saying, right? But you have these different emails and so on and so forth. But when you respond as these other people, you can be official, you can be bureaucratic, right? You can be yes, no, or you can be like, well, you need to fill out form 2A, or you got to wait 6 months, whatever it may be, right? You can be the DMV lady, right? Maybe you can have a DMV lady, like a few of those where you could just be dismissive with people, or bureaucratic, if you will, with people, and don't give them any special treatments in that particular way. But I get what you're saying. I think you're kind of, the idea here is we are trying to talk about what this cutting off is, because it's more of a surgery than the axe over there would suggest. Okay. It is more of a surgery. And I brought up a little bit of nuance, you said, by talking about the compartmentalization based on trust and also function. Let's talk a little bit about the trust aspect. Let's nuance it a little bit more, because I think that this is key. We talked last time, and go ahead and check it out, ladies and gentlemen. If you not get the chance to watch last time's stream, not too long, we went into how to spot them. So now you've spotted them, and the idea is, what is this trust? Because people talk about trust all the time in a non-nuanced way. So I would like to talk about trust from the level of competence, and then from the level of intention, and also from the level of sobriety, right?
So maybe I trust my mom's intentions that she doesn't want to harm me, right? But I may not trust her competence vis-a-vis whatever context, right? Or I may not even trust her sobriety at it, or maybe whatever, depending on what's going on, right? And you know what? Dad's a little office rocker right now. Yeah, he needs to go to a rehab. I don't know what it might be. He needs to find Jesus. But until then, I trust his intentions, right? But I cannot trust his competence. No, or in other words, there are these three dimensions, simple ones again, with regards to trust. So you're going to compartmentalize people based on these three things: the trust of their competence, the trust of their intentions, and also the trust of their sobriety based on track record and other, shall we say, empirical or other kinds of data that you may have, right? But any thoughts on that in terms of like, well, I may trust you in this one regard, but not in the other regard, and people tend to confuse this thing like, well, don't you trust me? It's like, well, yeah, I trust you, but there are dimensions to it.
Yeah, trust is it's on a spectrum. that seems to be the thing that people say when they don't want to give a real...
Yeah, that's the answer to everything, right? Well, what do you think about this? Well, this, is on a spectrum.
You can sound smart and also not be saying anything at the
There you
same
go.
time. So it's good stuff. But it's sort of on a spectrum, right? So, and trust is something that is earned, and it has to be earned over a period of time. And you will trust someone as you have seen them operate in particular capacities. You will trust them in those capacities. So, for instance, loaning somebody your car, that's a pretty high threshold for trust. Yeah, there's some close friends of mine that if they were really in a bind, I would probably allow them to use my car. But they would be people that I've known for years and years and years. And mind you, like, they've never been in a car accident, or, they've always been very responsible. Every time I call them, they get back to me right away. So I don't have this sort of fear of, okay, I just let them borrow my car. Now I can't get in touch with them. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't create that kind of thing. But probably borrowing my car probably would be reserved for probably family members. But not every family member is probably, for everybody, is going to be the person that you're going to want to loan your car to. Mm-hmm. And it could be maybe one of your family members has had a history of getting DUIs or something. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, I don't know if it's a wise decision for me to, okay. So then what they invariably do is they start to say, well, the reason you don't trust me is because you haven't forgiven me. Well, no, that's not the thing. And I'm a Christian, so I believe that you should forgive, and really forgiveness is for you, not necessarily for the other person. Mm-hmm. But forgetting and wisdom are also, those are also sort of issues that you have to grapple with.
If I can hold you right there. This kind of well, first of all, shout out to, if you don't mind reading whom the very gracious super chatter is over here.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's Marquise Kid.
$5, I believe, right?
Yes, $4.99. Thank you very much.
So you just mentioned this thing about like, well, forgiving, forgetting, wisdom, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so here's the thing, right? This idea of forgiving and it being for yourself is more than just it's something that applies to more than just human interactions. What I mean is the idea of forgiving, the idea of stoically saying the serenity prayer as you go through life, right? Like things I cannot control, things I can
I need the strength to do them. I need the wisdom to know the difference, right? That idea is the forgiving of the tiger, the winter, the economy, the bloodline, the times that you're born in, your cards, right? Right?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, Wallace? I'm talking about your cards, your fate, your destiny, those kinds of things, whatever it may be. In other words, the external world out there, both internal and external, the world as you find it, you need to you need to forgive, but you don't go back into, the flames, right? It's no different with human beings as well. In other words, if you've had to learn the hard way from your hands getting burnt on the stove, and then you forgive the stove again, you forgive the winter and the lot you're dealt, the cards you're dealt in life, but you know how to navigate them. And people are more like a little science experiment than not. In other words, that's why they say, if you know you got to stay out of Miami, just stay the hell out of Florida, right? You can't go to Miami, because if it's more likely, it's very likely that if you have a certain kind of temptation, right, and I put you in a certain particular circumstance, almost like a science experiment, right? If I set it up just right, I can get you to fall if you give me leeway, right? If you give me leeway and I set you up, just in other words, that so back up from this, anyways. So you get. I just wanted to emphasize that point there about the fact that you're going to learn, and then you're going to have to change your behavior. But you're forgiven, right? You're forgiven that you almost drowned in that part of the river, but you don't keep going back to that river, right? Or that part.
Right.
You're like, it's no beef against the river. It's just like, my bad. That's the rapids. You're the rapids, Uncle Scott. So I can't deal with you anymore. I'm not going into your harebrained multi-level marketing schemes. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between, again, forgetting and forgiving, right? And you also just mentioned something about sort of getting over something, getting over the I don't want to contextualize it as emotional, but whatever that damage was, getting over that, that's a process also. And and then, if I was a preacher, I might say there's a difference between forgiveness and restoration, right? So restoration is more than just a matter of you having gotten over something, the person that's been wronged. It's the after effect of restitution. So the person has done something to make up for what was done wrong. And so then you're able to restore them to a previous state. But let's be straight about this. That's not a common thing. Usually what happens is people will give you one shot at something of a particular magnitude. And if you screw it up, that's the only chance you're going to get.
Yeah.
They're not going to go back and say, hey, let's put you on a 12-step, plan. Let's put you on this thing to get you back to, back to trustworthy. No, that's not how it works. And you should not expect people to do that. That's foolhardy. I mean, you should not expect people to do that, and it's unfair because people do not owe you anything. I don't owe you a thing.
It's still because here's what. Okay, so it's liable to happen to me. It's liable to happen, and I'm liable to cut someone off in that manner, right? So, and for me, it's still fair because I always say, hey, number one, I don't begrudge them anything. Number one, right? And then number two, there are other doors out there. Like, I'm not, depending on the level of the crime, right? Let's say I'm not going out there kind of besmirching their name, saying never do business with this guy again because he wasn't a particularly good employee or something, that kind of a thing. It's like, well, you're not the best employee for me, or you're not the best, or this situation is not working out best, right? Or to put it in the context of our conversation, you're going to need to, shall we say, cut this person off, axe him off, chop him off, get in there with a scalpel, do some surgery. But the idea is they still have chances with other people out there. There are other people out there that have not heard of their BS, right? There are other people out there that they have not burnt the bridge towards, or
Yeah.
with regards to, right? So it's still all fair. It's still all open. It's like, hey, you know what? Go out there. There's always other chances, other towns, other people, but not here anymore. I mean, like, come on. It's kind of silly. Like, as you said, it's unfair. Why would you want to keep coming back here? I mean, don't you even? I mean, it's all screwed up here. It's awkward. Go away.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, folks that never learn and just continue to burn bridges for their life. I mean, you there's not that many bridges that you're going to have the opportunity to burn. I mean, it's not infinite. I mean, and we live in the information age where everyone is connected. So it's not going to take very long for the sort of word to get out that you're not trustworthy.
Mhm.
But still, even though, I tell students, my students, look, you might think right now, so you're in college, you're still figuring stuff out. You may think that people will understand that you're going to make some mistakes, but you need to be careful with that, because
Mhm.
if you begin to be thought of as the person that shows up late all the time, the person that's not prepared, the
Mhm.
person that, doesn't show up for someone's recital.
Mhm.
I mean, all it takes is that to happen one time. And then,
Mhm.
you may or may not have dealt with that person in another capacity. But look, years later, I'm not going to take a chance on someone that
Yeah.
missed somebody's recital.
Especially these first
Like,
impression
oh,
type situations as well.
I, I,
But
I'm not going to
yeah,
do it.
yeah.
I'm just not going to do it. Why would I do that? Because I'm on the line.
Mhm.
Now I'm
And
booking somebody, and I don't know if they're going to do what they're supposed to do or not. And
it's
and yeah,
yeah. So again, to the what we laid down on the floor regarding categories was like competence, sobriety. You just mentioned something that is in the sobriety category, right? So, in a certain sense, let's flip the table a little bit to talk about ourselves and how we can be the person that doesn't get cut off. Because trust me, especially you remember we said last time, right? That you want to be in the room where you have the most to gain. Therefore, you tend to want to be in the room where most like 80% of the people in the room, or at least everyone in the room, has something that you're looking up to, at least a dimension, a parameter, a aspect of them that you are looking up to, right? That kind of a thing. So when you're doing that kind of thing, okay, it's easy to be that person in the room, right? That it's like now slacking because we're saying, hey, go into the room of all the high performers, right? We're saying, hey, Nicer, hey, Wallace, hey, D, go in the room of all the high performers. But when you go in there, guess what? Now you see that axe man over there? You're the one that somebody may be looking to axe off and be like, hey, you're the dead weight. Now, so here, with regards to this trusting, compartmentalizing based on trust, and we talked about competence, we talked about sobriety, and we talked about intention. So here are three things that you have. Let me tell you, because here's how I tend to play it. It is rare that you have all three of these in full power. What I mean, natural talent wise, or have in terms of practice wise, right? And we tend things we're naturally talented at, we tend to lean on, and then maybe we neglect other aspects. Okay, but let me say this: when it comes, sobriety is not my strongest suit. What do I mean by that? I mean, um, I'm always I walk a little bit too much on the edge in terms of biting a lot of things, right? And juggling and kind of walking on the wild side a little bit in terms of commitments, right? Um, don't completely explode everything, but I'm not complete. So, but so what do I do? Therefore, I have to work very strongly on my competence, right? There has to be no question about, okay, he is competent though, right? And also about your intentions. So you communicate your intentions clearly. You make sure that you're showing good faith all the time, and that you have the competence, even if you're working on your sobriety part, because you're a crazy person, right? If you have a little crazy in you, but you can't have too many struggles, as they say, right? You can't have too many struggles. So these are three areas in which compartmentalization happens. And so, what do you have to say about that in terms of, like, okay, working on your strengths, or understanding that you have different parts to play when it comes to this kind of leverage?
So first, tell me what the three things are.
So there's a competence, intention, right? So trust based on your intention, okay. Trust
Right.
based on your competence, and trust based on your sobriety, which is more of the, as I said, are you a wild card, or are you more stable? Right.
Right. No, yeah. I mean, I think uh, reasonable people that have experience, people that have had a lot of experience collaborating with different people, not just like the same person all the time, not just doing stuff solo. They're going to understand and they're going to recognize that uh, there are different kinds of folks, and it's not likely that everyone is going to be strong in everything. And there will be a tendency for people to lean on certain of those things that you just mentioned. And so long as what it is that you have them doing can coincide with that what their strength is, then you'll be okay. So
Mm-hmm.
part of it has to do with selecting the right kind of people for the right kind of trust. Like okay, I'm really depending on you to X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
Um, maybe in the sobriety category, maybe
Mm-hmm.
if someone's not, you know, uh, doesn't have a 10 score in that category,
Yeah.
and then maybe that means that
But he's the best
they're
trumpet
not going
player in Memphis, that kind of thing.
to. Right, but maybe they, they'll be like the last second getting to the gig, every once in a while, or whatever. Um, as long as they're at least that they're going to make it to the gig and it's not going to screw stuff up,
Mm-hmm.
then it's like, okay. Now, for me personally,
Mm-hmm.
um, since I'm not just the person that is leading the band,
Mm-hmm.
I'm also playing in the band. And since I'm human, and the music that I tend to play tends to be really challenging, I need to be, um, I don't want to be like particularly anxious when I start the
Mm-hmm.
gig.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, um, I may have to balance that out. I may have to say, well, this guy's a really great trumpet player
Mm-hmm.
and he can really nail the music, but I also have to be able to play the music well. And
Yeah,
I
and
don't want to be
this is not
annoyed.
my parents' backyard. This is the whatever, the Hollywood Bowl we're
Right,
playing tonight.
right. Right. So yeah, I think that's a good point, and that's a really good um, nuance.
Mm-hmm.
It's we're getting more granular with that kind of detail, that kind of point. So yeah.
Gotcha. So yeah, so take it for example when it comes to help. Okay, we're continuing here because again, we're talking about how you cut them off, and then we're asking, well, what is cutting them off? And we say, hey, it's compartmentalizing, generally speaking, based on trust and function. You're putting people in different layers, different categories, different levels of remove, if you will, from access to you. What is access? Well, there's access that goes all the way from somebody that sleeps in the same bed with you, all the way through to someone that can only reach you on LinkedIn, right? And everything in between, right? So when it comes to getting ish done, we have already identified that these people can be very instrumental, either to pushing you forward or to holding you back, either actively or passively, so on and so forth. We're talking now about the fact that you can trust based on competence or intention or sobriety. So there's another competence example that I have in terms of somebody that I work with whom is competent, okay? And not very And sobriety comes in all kinds of forms, right? And it's usually, these creative types, somewhat, somewhat intelligent. They're geniuses at, doing this particular spreadsheet thing or whatever, or writing this code. But every now and again, stuff happens with this kid, right? And he goes AWOL on you, and you're like, what the hell happened? And it's like, whatever, and my meds. Maybe he's on the spectrum. I mean, no shade to anybody, right?
Maybe he's on the spectrum.
Exactly.
That's a different kind of spectrum.
Different kind of spectrum, indeed. So, but the thing is, I still utilize those kinds of people, and for me, it's a native thing for me. What is native? What am I talking about? I'm saying that ability to look at different people and just kind of see it in a certain way. It's cold and calculating, but this is kind of my personality, right? From the outside view, looks cold and calculating, but I always look at the instrumentality, the utility, the functionality of somebody, right? And objectively speaking, right? Now you may put any value judgment to that you want. Oh, does it mean you're objective? I was like, well, that's on you. I didn't say all that. I'm just saying that's how I just naturally kind of look at people that way. But what tends to happen though is that I can almost find a use for different kinds, right? So this guy that's not so sober, and I'm talking about someone in particular right now, where I kind of solely trust him for a very formal type of setting, but I can say, hey, what I do is I actually use this guy for research. Okay, so you can kind of get the picture here. It's like, I'm not like going to give you a project I'm working on, but I'm researching getting into the power grid business. Okay, I'm going to contact you and be like, hey, by 3 weeks, can you gather up this kind of information? Blah, 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 blah. They'll have it, right? But if it's, hey, I have this particular thing to execute today, can you do these calculations in this drawing? Like, nah, that's not the kid for it, right? That kind of a thing. And you got to know this when it comes to your life in different aspects. Again, compartmentalizing, having these roles based on function. Here's the functions examples. And also we talked about based on trust as well. You developing your trust based on competence, your trust based on intention, and your trust based on sobriety, both for yourself and then for the outside world as well. But now let's talk about, okay, we started out with what cutting off is. Let's get into more of the methodology, right? Let's say, for example, right, there's somebody who's always reaching out to you for opportunity. They always got opportunities, right? They're hitting you up on your email. Maybe someone even got you. They found you in a WhatsApp group. Now they got your number somehow because someone in some conference they shook somebody's hand and they looked like the person endorsed them tacitly, and they were like, "Oh, well, he's a cool kid. Let me give him my number." And now he's got all kinds of things he's hitting you up for, which are silly. He's trying to get you to join Amway, multi-level marketing. Anyways, let's go ahead and acknowledge, by the way, and if you could keep this in your head while we read the super chats, the idea is, what are you going to do with this particular scenario? And then let's use that to examine several scenarios about the means of cutting people off. Somebody had mentioned ghosting, right? Which is one way of going about doing things. But the actual tactics, as I said, this is more surgical. We have to identify, we've looked at different aspects, how to categorize. Okay, now let's pull out the scalpel. Let's start doing some cutting. But first of all, let's shout out to the super chat in the house. You mind reading? And why don't you give him a sound effect as well? Pick something out.
Sure.
Your favorite.
Of course. That's shout out to Solo TV 84. Trendsetter TV 84. The spirit of the Black Manosphere. But this is a SW1, which looks like a picture of a female with hello everyone in there, and we very much appreciate that. And I think there's another one in there too, if I'm seeing this right.
Yeah, there is another super chat. There is a big one in there. Let's go ahead.
All
let's
right.
Double.
Yes. Claudie Pierre. There's power in knowing your weakness. Put everything in place to progress. Make it hard for you to fail. That is correct.
So, Dr. Thunder, let me rephrase the question on the table. We're getting into methodology, right? We're getting into the brass tacks. We're getting into how now you may cut off. We talked about compartmentalizing. So it gives us an idea of what the task is that is to be done, right? So it means we're going to need to shift things out with regards to access, with regards to generally speaking, communication. And we describe communication all the way from, you're sharing a bedroom and bathroom with someone, all the way through to, you don't, that kind of a thing. They can only reach you through the directory at your university or something, right? So this particular kid now has somehow they got in, but they need to be out, right? Let's use that kind of an example. Let's not get to the example of family stuff. So they got in, okay, and they desperately need to be out. They need to be out of this circle of yours. So what is to be done? How do you handle it? And you may give us some actual examples from your life.
Yeah. Oh man. It kind of reminds you, it's reminiscent of let's see here, like you're online and every once in a while you go to a site and it'll ask you, especially on your phone, to allow something. And then you allow it, and then what you didn't realize is that means that not only them, but they're going to sell that information to somebody else. And then that means you're going to be getting a bunch of bogus text messages and emails and all of this kind of stuff when maybe you should have just blocked it in the first place, to the point where you're even considering changing your cell phone number so you can start fresh. And because it can be really hard to get someone back out that you let in. And this is part of the reason why it's important to screen as much as possible the folks that you let inside. But once you've let someone in, I'm not a fan of ghosting. I'm not a fan of that because I mean, I wouldn't like if somebody did that to me, and and I don't want to sound, like a choir boy or something, but do unto others as you'd have them to do unto you. I try to, as much as I can, to try to treat other folks, the way I want to be treated. Okay, so ghosting is not something that I like. Like if I'm constantly sending messages to someone and they're not responding, it's like, okay, what's going on? They were responding initially and then they stop responding. And that's different from someone that is just not particularly consistent with responding. Sometimes they respond right away. Sometimes it takes them, a couple weeks to respond. Sometimes, like, if they're in the mode or in the zone, then it's like they're really snappy. And then out of season, so to speak, during different periods or when other stuff is going on in their life, they're very, very much spotty. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, you just intend to just never again respond to them. You're getting their messages, you're just not saying anything. That doesn't help them to learn how to become more tactful in the way that they try to kind of get in the inner circle, and to not sort of overuse the information somebody gave them. Like it's this thing. One of the reasons why people are very apprehensive about giving out certain kinds of information is that they don't want people to overuse it. Like if I give you my number, I don't want you calling me like, 10 times a day. You're overusing that. You're overusing that information. So don't make me regret giving you that information.
I think so. Let me add a little bit of a more nuance to this here, because I think that this particular on and off switch is the key thing to nuance here, because we're like, okay, you got to compartmentalize. But how do you shift someone from one compartment to the next, further out? in particular. Now, you're not bringing them closer. We tend to know how to bring people closer. That's not the part we're worried about. It's about
Right.
pushing them away now that we're talking about.
Right.
So that 0 or 1, if we were to nuance that a little bit, because
Yeah, I think a way to a way to once somebody's in to get them out is just to tell them straight, say, hey, right now is just not a good time. I'm
yeah.
very busy right now. You could give them an indication of when you'll be available,
Mm-hmm,
so then they'll stop badgering you. So you
mm-hmm.
can say, for the next 2 months, I'm going to be super busy doing X, Y, and Z. But when but I'm going to be much more open. This, say October or something. I'm going to be a lot more open.
Mm-hmm.
Or third quarter is going to be a good time for me to reconnect, for us to reconnect, and possibly get in on some things.
I like that you're saying this,
Um,
Dr. Stone, because check what I was about to say was the way you interact regularly should set up the means by which you bring people closer or push them further. Now, again, I'm saying that I'm this guy that's mechanically looking at everybody. It's like I'm the Terminator. I got like this thing, readings like utility, 5%. Not very useful to me. Dump that one. This person over. Oh yeah. Oh, that's a 75%er. Let's see what they got. Let's talk to them. But the idea is the means of interacting, right? Will already, in other words, I find people get into this kind of stuck situations all the time where they too
Mm.
quickly jump into some kind of thing. Let's say Karen, right? They start working at a hospital. Okay, this person, okay, Susan, starts working at a hospital. She jumps in heads over heels and she's friends with Karen the first 2 days. A week later, she finds out that Karen's a B. But things everybody knew Karen was a B. But you know what I'm saying, right? There are these people
Right.
who too quickly close the gap, too quickly bring people in. What I'm saying
Yeah.
is the way in which, first of all, because there's always a preventative aspect of things, but also there is a way in which you bring people in that also makes it easy to take people out because you have rules and parameters about yourself, about how you are interacted with, that people of common sense will detect and then pattern themselves after, and so on and so forth, right? So,
Yeah.
if you wish to kind of speak a little bit more about, and well, shout out to the super chat right there. There is a question also there on the table. We'll leave that there on the table for the super chat to address that. And we're talking about nuance in this thing about looking at the whole extension of the relationship from the beginning, and then there's some kind of initial state, an explosion, something happens, blah, 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 whatever, right? And then things settle
Mhm.
down, and it tends to be different. And the first thing that I would say in this particular regard, perhaps the first principle here when it comes to looking at the whole relationship, is never look at the initial state of a relationship, of any kind of a meeting. Oh, I met this guy at the conference. He was so great. Or, we started this class together. The first week, we were all buddies. We were hanging out. It was all three of us. But then she left and joined, or whatever it may be. The initial state of any experiment, of any kind of chemical composition, any kind of whatever, is going to be some chaos. In other words, you have to give time for the situation to evolve, right, into
Yeah.
the energy state that it wants to get into, and things will settle down, right? So that's the first principle. Never rush into becoming friends with Karen, and then a week later, everyone's like, "Well, didn't you? I mean, why, why did you fall for her trick?" But anyways, take it away.
Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. Yeah, I mean, it's such a common thing that it's a lyric to a to a song made famous by Elvis Presley. Um, I have to actually, I have worked on this quite a bit myself. Um, I have a tendency to bring people close quickly,
Mhm.
and then I'll find out that they're not worthy. Um, a lot of guys have this tendency with women. that they haven't sort of fully vetted them to see if they're truly trustworthy. And now it's like, now they're super close with this person. Okay, now you're living with them. Now, or now you, like a simp, you moved in to their place. Now it's like it's too late to be finding out that really this person is not trustworthy. Um, and yeah. So I think calculating that adequately is important. But what you have to do is you just have to get busy. So say for instance, if you do have one of these awkward sort of associations, you find out that it's not the right thing, you just have to get busy. Obviously, in the situation where you live with someone, then that's going to be more difficult, and that's why that would be ill-advised in that scenario. But in a work sort of situation where you've kind of brought somebody close, you can just get busy. Just get busy doing some other things and no longer be available for the same interactions.
Interesting. So there's a question here of adding versus subtracting. I think, shout out to the super chatter in the building. There's a question of, well, what will create, what will, I think if we were to create a kind of a zero level, like a low level, you're trying to climb out of a situation, I would say that getting rid of people is more effective, more bang for your buck, easier, as a matter of fact, to do than actually acquiring, because it tends to be the case that if you're going to acquire a better network that will inspire you and so on and so forth, you tend to already need to have certain things that you're bringing to the table, right? Certain skills you've developed, blah, 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 which if you already had, then it begs the question, why are you trying to, this kind of a thing. So therefore, I'm assuming a certain kind of a state of trying to go get higher. And in that case, I would say cutting people off, way more bang for your buck, more returns, requires less energy. And it's like entry level stuff. Just and then show your competence in order to get trust from the crew whom you are trying to benefit from, that you are trying to aspire towards, and so on and so forth. Is that competence thing and demonstrating your intention and competence and so on and so forth, and also sobriety, because it is in short supply, right? Especially when you're trying to climb, it is in short supply at the bottom rungs of things, that people are competent and so on and so forth. But anyways, Dr. Polymath, I don't know if you can hear me, but the link is in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. I dropped that off, and I think we have someone here, but they seem rather quiet.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what do you have for us?
Well, just in the shout out to Ike Ogia Mien and Dr. Lightning over there. How you brothers doing?
Doing all right. How are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. Today is my last day working from home, so I'm gonna use it by joining in this live stream at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Staying up all night. Okay.
Yeah, staying up all night. Anyways, yeah, the conversation is interesting. I think that Dr. Thunder has a slightly different approach, because I guess for his personality, he wants to get to know people. And again, like you mentioned, a lot of men like to get to know women quickly and invest very quickly. And the interesting thing is, when you do invest too quickly, however, sometimes, especially if the person is not valuable themselves, they're going to disrespect your value. And then also, if you give them the information and access, they're going to disrespect that access and not actually treat it with the respect that it deserves. And this obviously is going to then cause you to somehow, lose interest in them. And, it's going to even, sometimes it may even ruin a relationship that could have, been built slower through time in a slightly different kind of strength. Because ultimately, I guess people are looking for, it's like the brotherhood thing in the war, in the soldiers, is, can we go through things together? Can we have milestones of achievement with each other? Whether it's actual war or if it's a business or just experience within a kind of club or society, how can you put the things together that you each value and then create something? And because these are the kinds of relationships that last time, because even if there's a fault between either side, they tend to be the relationships where you've already overcome so much that to criticize someone on this level isn't going to be enough to kind of break the ego positions between either case. These tends to be
What do you have
where
to say
you
about
can
that,
sort
Dr.
of
Thunder? Because I
go
think
and recover and
Dr.
slowly,
Polymath over here has
fix
put quite a
things.
bit on the table.
Yeah, I mean,
Any thoughts? Yeah.
I think I mean, I agree. So what I was saying earlier is that's my natural tendency, but I've had to learn how to change that because it has put me at risk too often. Rushing in. Wise men say only fools rush in, and I was very much foolhardy in that, and it took several attempts. You know, several attempts before I figured out that it's likely that there's not very many people that you can trust very early and give them that kind of access that will not disrespect you, invalidate you, undervalue you in that way. I think it used to be in the past, I would say, at least dealing with women, there were less, it was less of a risk. So, say if we talked about 50 or 60 years ago, I think it was less of a risk. But these days, it's very much a risk, and I would say, of course, it's going to be a risk in pretty much any human interaction. So I would tend to agree with you.
Shout out to the practitioner in the house with the super chat and the question. And while we also continue to muse upon what was put on the table, the several things that are put on the table by Dr. Polymath, there is also a question here as to, well, strengthening, and I think it's akin to the other question about, well, adding or subtracting, so generally speaking, I'm for going for the pure, for the clean. I'm going for the surgery. I say take it out because the rotten apple, okay, will do a lot of damage to you. Okay, it's like driving with in other words, here's the analogy, right? When you drive and you have your parking brake up, right? Back in the day when it used to be right there, right? And you have it up. Now it's a button, right? Isn't that right, Dr. Thunder? You in your new fancy cars, it's a button.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you have the parking brake up. It's not just that you're going slow. You can't just say, okay, I'll have my parking brake up and I'll go a little slower. But no, what are you doing? You're damaging the car, right? So the idea is it's not just a question of, okay, let's just ride with our parking brake up. Let's just go ahead and use the net with the weak link or whatever. Or let's just patch this. It's that you're damaging the entire infrastructure, and there is all that kind of rotten apple osmosis, if you will, morale, if you will, especially when you're talking about a group of people, because not everyone is going to be okay with the fact that you guys are letting you get the point. So those are my thoughts. Anyways, Dr. Thunder, or let's take to Dr. Polymath. Any comments about the super chat question?
If there's a weak link in the structure, do you try to reinforce the link to lengthen the bond or shorten the length? Well, actually, technically, shorter length links that are many is actually stronger than longer length links. However, again, that also means that fatter links are also better. So I guess you have depth. Length is not the only issue here. So depth actually is what matters the most. Yeah. So in my case, I try to find key figures in my life and my circle, key figures that are trustworthy in at least 2 or 3 different ways. Because if you have people who you trust in at least key figures, what it means is you can relax a little bit and you don't have to be always watching your back on too many fronts. So if I have a weak link, usually I'm a little bit different from Ike. I don't necessarily surgically remove them from my life completely. But what I do is I make them very, very aware of what they are. They're failures. Now, most of the time, 90 something percent, they don't change. They blame me, and then they become a victim. And the fact that I criticized anything in them becomes I become the bad guy. So I embody that part. However, a few times, like 5, 6, 7, I don't know what percent, but less than 10, they actually do consider what they did and how their life reflects onto their vision or mission that we say that we want to get. And they actually become assets. So I do think, in my case at least, I like to make people aware of why I'm going to, basically put them at the back burner and tell them that they're currently less useful to me. The real word I wanted to use is useless, but less useful to me, because I like to give people the consent, the ability for them to make a different choice. And if they make the same choice, which is to not change or acknowledge the behaviors and circumvent that action to make themselves more useful to the whatever group or me. Again, I check myself. It's a two-part system here, of course. Yeah, so I like to give people a choice and a chance first.
That's interesting. In my case, what happens is the people that I bring close, if they're not worthy, they can't handle being close because I'm a pretty intense character, and so I'm kind of no nonsense and always trying to improve and always working on something. In people that are dead wood, uh, it's like it's like bringing something too close to the sun or something, a planet revolving too closely to the sun. It's going to burn everything up. So that's what tends to happen. So even in the situations where I have, in a very foolhardy manner, rushed in, what the tendency is that the folks that get close quickly, they will start to really show who they actually are. Because insecurity and other things will tend to expose the kind of person that they are. So, anyhow.
So we got Game Changer in the house. What you got for us regarding this topic? And remember, ladies and gentlemen, what we are about today. What are we about? What are we doing? We're talking about how to cut them off. How to cut them off. Okay, yesterday we spotted them. We hunted them down. We scouted. We noticed them. We spied them. We scoped them. They're in our sights. What do we do? Right? So we're talking about compartmentalizing, and we're talking about trusting. We're talking about trusting based on different aspects, competence, intention, so on and so forth. Granularizing this thing and then talking about the modes and methods and of pushing them aside and so on and so forth. And we got Game Changer in the house. You got the floor. You got the mic, as Bernard Riley would say.
Okay, thank you very much. I wish I had seen yesterday's show about how to spot the behaviors. I'm kind of upset that I didn't see that. I'll have to catch the replay. Now, as far as how to get rid of them, I wanted to, before I get into that, I wanted to discuss the link question, because I think that that's worth, I definitely agree with Dr. Thunder's assessment, but I wanted to go a little bit deeper and say that unlike with a structure where it's a matter of either the link exists or not, and in the structure analogy, I would just say as long as the weakness of the link is strong enough to fulfill the need of the structure, then I would say keep it or reinforce it just to have that extra. But, you have to take into account the amount of materials that you have and, what you're working with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I want to say about that. When cutting someone off, there's different levels of cutting someone off. It's not an either or thing, or it doesn't have to be an either or thing. You can put someone on limited access to your life, right. Meaning, okay, I cut this person off, but not completely. It's just that, I probably won't invite them to certain aspects of my life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's different levels and different ways of doing that. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there.
I see. So, Dr. Thunder, the last question I asked you, okay, we were getting into how to cut these people off, how to cut them off. And perhaps let me ask you, Game Changer, what's your preferred way? And also, Dr. Polymath, just give me a quick sentence there on your kind of method. Dr. Thunder has even mentioned, just being a blazing sun, a planet that attracts people. They come to it, and then if they can't stand it, they burn up, and then he just keeps on whirling through the galaxy. And also talking about, having this kind of a structure. I talk about the whole beginning to end thing. Like for me, I don't even think about it. It's more of a when I start from the beginning of when I see you, it's all a program, right? It's all like it's gonna work itself out. And most of it is intuitive. I'm not saying I'm out there plotting. So like I said, I don't have the graph paper plotting points, with a protractor and everything. No, it's just more intuitive that I kind of just feel my way through it as far as how we interact. So Game Changer, what's your way? Are you a rusher into bringing people in, or do you not? And how do you kind of manage the different lengths of arm at which you keep people?
Well, I used to be a rusher in bringing people in, and that was because you come out of high school, college, and because I went to a primarily white university and stuff. You just kind of make friends with anybody that shares a similar history with you. So you just kind of rush and bring people in. However, after years of somewhat bad experiences in that regard, I've learned to be more cautious.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Dr. Polymath, you want to, in a more succinct way, even though you mentioned before, talk about how you keep people at arm's length and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So in my case, I have at least 3 different states of access. So there is people who everyone has access to my phone number and every other kind of email and Skype, etc. I don't make any gradations on that. The difference for me is whether I actually answer your call and or if I call back. That's how I keep people at length. So people, now I do block a few people, but it's always temporarily. So if I'm focusing on some work, they'll get put on the temporary block list. But ultimately, everyone has access. It's just whether I interact with them or not in any sort of whether I prioritize them. Simple example, very succinct. An ex-girlfriend of mine, I was helping out with her work for a master's dissertation, etc. And she came back and, she tried to make me do the same thing, but for free. I told her, no, I'm going to charge this.
And by ex-girlfriend, you mean your East African concubines? I knew it was going to get to this when you started talking about blocking them. Like, you're blocking people temporarily. I'm like, you're probably doing some kind of privilege thing. You're flying in from London. I get the picture. This guy flies in from London to Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia.
This one
he abuses these ladies.
This one is East African, but she actually lives in Ireland. She's Somali, yes, but lives in Ireland. So my London privilege isn't quite as potent in this case. Perhaps my accent. Anyways, so issue here is I block them, and let's say I unblock them, they still expect me to be a simp and help them with their work. I make it very clear that I'm going to charge them for the work. If they don't actually pay me, I simply stop responding to their messages. And usually they comply one way or another, or I just simply don't respond to it, and they're sort of in that list of, well, just do not engage.
Okay, so let's starting with Dr. Thunder. Let's address the topic of if there are any moral considerations to be had, right? Game Changer, right? Dr. Polymath. It's like when it comes to cutting people off, there is a question of judge not lest ye be judged, which means, by the way, that you're not going to go in there doing something that you're not aware or able to take, that you're not aware could also happen to you. We mentioned, hey, you may be the person that, the axe man is after, right? In that particular network. You may be the slacker in the network. You may be the guy, right? If you're looking around in the room and you can't find, whatever, maybe it is you, right? So there is that aspect of it, right? Which is like, okay, the, shall we say, hypocrisy aspect, the judge not lest you be judged, the kind of he without sin cast the first stone aspect. Are there other aspects, morally speaking, to this idea of cutting people off, beginning with Dr. Thunder, and then we go to Game Changer and Polymath?
Well, like I said, the reason that the ghosting to me doesn't seem to for me, I'm not as comfortable with that method. Is that I would want to know why someone was cutting me off, and or uh, I don't know. I just think it's easier to just get busy. So if I'm busy and I'm not, so I just don't have time to talk to you, and I can tell them that. I can say, you know, next couple months I have a really important project that I'm working on, and after that, maybe we can reconnect. X, Y, and Z. So then that way, it gives them a particular idea of when I would be available. But then also it gives me a break from them. And often, you know, often a couple months, 3 months, people they can sort of reevaluate some things, and maybe they themselves would be involved in some other things too, and so then it becomes a non-issue. But again, usually is the case that people, and I'm not trying to either pat myself on the back or make myself sound like there's something wrong with me. But people can't handle being close to me. Most people cannot. And that's just it's a reality. And that's because most people are not really serious, and I'm not trying to say well, maybe I am. I'm a pretty serious character. So unless you're serious, you're not gonna like being around me, because I'm not messing around.
Okay. I think you're standing firm on the stoicism upon which, by the way, I think all of this is based. I think that the whole idea of cutting people off and so on and so forth, I think comes in with a stoic set of premises, right? There is the idea of, compartmentalizing and trusting based on this and this, and it's all just, I picture it. It's all it's all we're out there in the wilderness hunting type stuff, and even the images of being in the foxhole and so on and so forth. Right.
But the real solution, though, is to do better screening on the front side. But since it's being framed like, okay, the person's already in, how do you get rid of them now? See, my problem in the past is, and I'm like Game Changer. As a young man, I was very much rushing in to everything, and then I learned that that's not the best thing. And it's just a lot easier to keep people away than it is to try to get them out after you already have them in. Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Polymath, he without sin cast the first stone, other moral considerations, topics of that sort. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, this is an interesting one. I think if you're gonna do something like like a power dance, that's what this is. At least at the objective scale, is that you have to be aware that the oppositional end will also do their own thing as well. And usually this is the sort of things that embolden people to feel, justified to do things that they otherwise wouldn't usually do. So if you're going to do a movement like this, you need to make sure that you set the keys and the chess pieces accordingly, so that you don't end up the butt of the joke instead. Simple example here, not quite so related, but somewhat related. My friends, so-called friends, during my PhD, they thought that they cut me off from their circle. In reality, I cut myself off from their circle. So it's quite interesting. But they actually assume that they're the ones who cut me off. But I was doing the same thing, perhaps even before they did it. Now, this is a mutual one, which is pretty cool. But the issue here is now they try to get me back into their circle once they saw certain things were moving in a certain direction. So it's sort of like, be aware that the game is at least twofold. Your side, their side.
The enemy gets a vote, as somebody likes to always say. It was like, okay, I'm just going to make this perfect plan, and we're going to enter Kandahar like this, and we're going to do some shock and awe. And it's like, well, you know what? the human beings down there, they know the mountain pretty well. They've been fighting for a long time. They get to vote too. They get a say in the matter. So, game changer, anything vis-a-vis the morality of this, how far to go, how not to be a hypocrite, casting stones and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So as far as the morality piece of it go, I don't really think that should be too much of a concern, and that's primarily because since we're using the sin analogy, it's not that the person is particularly sinful and you're on a different moral thing. I mean, you might be, but that's not usually the case. Generally speaking, it seems as though you would just have incompatible sins. And you don't really have to have any type of disdain or distaste for the person at that point. It's just like, listen, my sins are much different than your sins. That's kind of like, if you have somebody in prison for assault and, he looks at the next person and say, wait, you're a snitch. Well, it's like his sin, he has a sin that's a sin to you, but, you are somebody who's also considered a sinner. So you obviously not going to like each other because you're incompatible, but you're both sinners. And that's the way I look at that. I don't really use myself as a measuring stick because it's a different measuring system that we have. And that's perfectly fine. It's just an incompatible one. So anything I do at that point, I don't really feel any moral, anything morally holding me back. However, as far as ghosting, as Dr. Thunder mentioned, someone completely, it's not for the, that I can relate to whatever issue that they have, thing that would hold me back from ghosting someone. It's just that I don't really see the need to officially ever ghost anyone. I mean, I found that limiting access to somebody to the point that appears to be ghosting works out, meaning that, the level of compatibility determines how high of a priority you have in my life. And some people have a very high one, some people have a very low one, but they're still in it. Some of them, it's so low to where, if they call and, I'm watching the smoke come off of an incense, I won't answer because I'm busy watching the smoke come off of an incense, meaning that, your priority is so low that I would rather watch an incense burn than to talk to you. Now, I wouldn't even consider that ghosting. I would consider that just that person having extraordinarily low priority.
That incense smoke can be beautiful. It's like this thermodynamic, quantum mechanical, even. Oh no, just thermodynamic. Mystery of where's it gonna go. So I think that. Let me ask you this: how do you screen people out, game changer? You mentioned before that you tend to bring people in. That was a thing, or maybe is a thing, and maybe you deal with it now. How do you do the screening? What's your sieve mechanism?
And actually it took me a long time to come up with a mechanism. I start to look for certain qualities in people. One, if they're saboteurs, another, if they're backstabbers, people who overly gossip about others, tend to, get screened out. And
by the way, I was listening to again the conversation we had on your channel about those different types, which was very interesting. Very interesting, and then partially got me into this kind of idea of the enemies of progress, even though it was more of a different different take. But anyways, go ahead.
No, I mean, that's actually a very good guideline. The 7 habits or the 7 types of people you should avoid. Absolutely. So, yeah. And, I do kind of look for those types, those qualities in people. I also look for them in myself, but I look for those qualities in people and, as it says, try to avoid them.
So, Dr. Thunder.
So can I respond to something in the chat?
Go ahead.
Someone says, I agree that the first law of nature is selflessness. Species that survive selfishness. But species that survive the longest are actually selfless. I often use ants as an example, who work in the collective best interest of the colony, as opposed to the individual self-interest, meaning ants are self-sacrificing as long as the colony endures. So
Right.
I'm not really certain if that's the case.
But here's the thing, because their level. Okay, the idea of the ant colony. Okay, the goal, right? Whatever drives it, maybe a gene, maybe whatever, right? Is rather self-centeredly trying to get its point across, along with the fungi and the trees and everything else, right? So the idea of selfishness need not necessarily be held or contained within the individual only. The idea of the selfish gene, for example, right? With the selfish species, the selfish survival. In other words, that survival will go against all odds, whether it be of the species or whatever, regardless of what level you're looking at it at, against the environment and against all the competitors. So I don't know if that's a useful kind of a demarcation to make there, but I think that it leads to a lot of confusion a lot of times when people say, oh, cooperation versus competition or selfishness versus kind of selflessness. It's like, well, it depends on what you're looking at, what you're saying, right?
Okay.
No,
I mean,
you're just gonna let me off the hook like that?
Well, no, I mean, I see what you're saying, and I see where you're going with that. However, just evidence to the contrary. When you look at every phylum of creature on this planet, with insects, the dominant species seem to be the one that can work effectively collectively, and that is the ant. Human beings, for example, fish. You probably see species like piranhas, or maybe the fish kingdom is an exception of this, but is an exception to this.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting though, because in this particular task, right, of the cutting of the people off that you mentioned, you're talking about screening out using this, not a backstabber, not a saboteur, so on and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is a premise that you are concerned primarily with your survival, your well-being. You got ish to do, as is the premise of this show, right? Getting ish done. So you're cutting people off. By the way, the whole point of trying to cut these people off is because they're enemies of your progress. Progress towards what? You got stuff to do, important things to do. Dr. Thunder say, hey, go into the room where you are the lowest, have the most to gain. We talked about many ways in which to spot them and how to avoid them. But you have to have a desire and a passion to actually overcome all the inertia of sitting on your ass or comfortable with the status quo, it being your status and also the status of people around you and so on and so forth, to push. And some people refer to that as a certain kind of selfishness. Would you grant that? That might be their interpretation?
Yeah. I mean, okay. So humans are interesting creatures because we have it set up in a way to where serving society is serving oneself. And that's interesting. Like a person who builds a bridge serves both society and themselves because they get paid to do so. So it's very difficult to separate the two in modern society. We don't just do things just for the sake of getting it done. However, if you were to compare civilizations and look at a time when they were more species, evolved species, humanoid species, the ones that endured ours, even over the ones that were stronger and some might even say smarter, like Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, and things like that. The ones that endure were us, and that was because of our ability to work effectively collectively. It really doesn't matter the species if they're stronger, faster, better, or whatnot. If they can't function collectively as a whole, then you're going to lose. If you look at ancient warfare, it wasn't really it wasn't always the case that the tribe or the army with the most numbers that won, or even the stronger ones that won, or the more effective and skilled ones that won. But however, it was always the one where they were better organized, and each individual soldier of various type worked in a effective group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Let's talk about this word selfish. So selfish is someone that's concerned. So selfish is concerned excessively or exclusively with oneself.
Yes.
So it's possible to focus on yourself and develop yourself so that you can be the kind of person that can serve and help others more effectively, i.e., provide for your family. So it may take a lot of time by myself working on my own characteristics, qualities in myself that would actually help me to be able to get, advanced on my job and get pay raises, which for my family would be particularly beneficial. Um, so it's an interesting word that gets thrown around because often when we say selfish, uh, in that context, it's not selfish in the sort of self-centered, egotistical. Um, you, you only care about, uh, you're only concerned with your own pleasure. You're only concerned with, you yourself profiting. Uh, and it can create this sort of how do I want to say this? It can create this sort of confusion, well, not a confusion, but at least a sort of double meaning of the same term. So I suppose it's a little confusing when
Hmm.
when people tell you, well, you just have to be selfish. You just have to be more selfish in X, Y, and Z. In my estimation, being selfish is never good.
Okay, so
But there is a
look,
sense where focusing on yourself
yeah.
can be a positive thing. So I just wanted to create to draw that
Mhm.
distinction.
That is good, but let me even I'm going to do something. I'm going to hop up and say, okay, you it's fine to try to nuance the point and try to say, okay, there's a particular arrangement of circumstances that is undesirable, and that's the only time you can call it selfish. It's not only by the involvement of focusing on oneself, it is perhaps a necessary ingredient, but it's not the sufficient, right? It has to
Mm.
have other things in order to be arranged in such a way that we say, oh, that's a selfish situation, right? Fine. But
Mm.
I will come and I would say this beyond that, beyond just okay, saying okay, it's a more of a nuanced thing. Okay, fine. I would say I will invoke Friedrich Nietzsche here and the people who say, hey, that things are these kinds of things are perspectival in the sense that not everybody can do the kind of selfish thing that you're talking about, Dr. Thunder, right? That for the masses, it may be the case, or let's say even a portion of the masses. Let's say it's only 25% of people. They cannot even fathom the idea of focusing on yourself while also balancing this and then doing that and then kind of doing this wizardry into the future of mapping out things will then balance itself out. Like, trust me, okay? And then actually enact on this, have the real-time critical thinking skills to overcome all that emotional bias, all that prejudice and pre-digested stuff that's all within us to overcome that. That is not everybody. And I would say, going along with Friedrich Nietzsche again, saying, hey, selfishness or not becomes almost a class thing, right? And by this rank ordering, you can call it personality / intelligence / whatever it may be. But that, hey, this is just a case where you cannot say the same thing for everybody. What do you have to say about that, Dr. Polymath? I'm coming in with the, shall we say, slightly relativistic, or I tend to call it perspectival anyways, but it's slightly different. That, hey, you cannot, some people can do this selfish thing. Other people cannot even be trusted with handling that weapon or even know what it is. So chop their heads off.
Yeah, I mean, there's several different definitions here that we can actually unpack. So, selfishness definition one is the exclusivity of self-interest, self-focus at the detriment of the group. I think that's what most people think it means, which is fair
I think that's
enough.
what Game Changer doesn't like. I think Game Changer cares about the
Right.
group.
It's a detrimental aspect, yeah. So, yeah, I think most people can agree. If you do this to a detriment, then of course it's not good. But if you do it without that detriment, there's ultimately nothing wrong with it. You're just self-interested. And we all are. I mean, we all want to have the woman with the biggest booty, right? We all want what we
Or the
want.
lightest
And
skin.
right, exactly. We want light skin, big booty, BI,
She's
whatever.
light-skinned.
I don't think she's the only one that I
So
want.
yeah, and love is an interesting thing because it's one of the areas where we are allowed, societally at least, to be selfish in this regard. We all know what partner, especially women, who would be better for us, statistically speaking, across time, and better for our children. Most of us do not do the choice that will be better for either us or our children. We do the thing that is more selfish to our desires. So the interesting thing here is just to make that demarcation between selfishness to a detriment of others, or selfishness to a convergence with the what others will actually gain from that circumstance. American capitalism is a perfect example of this. Is selfishness with a cooperative action that is implemented by how others interact with it. You want to get the patent on your invention because you'll get millions. Other people will also get a valuable skill, trade, or invention that they can use, and then this will also drive others to do the same thing. So the interesting with at least humans with creativity and intelligence is that we can be cooperative and also selfish at the same time. Because the issue here is not the cooperation part. I mean, that's necessary. A child, a woman needs to be very selfish to make her child survive. That is actually a selfish thing because that's her desires, right? But it appears like it's selfless to the outside world because she's doing it to a detriment of her own self. But in reality, she's actually in line with her desires, and that is actually required. The issue here with selfishness and selflessness, ultimately, the two words are interchangeable. It just depends on whether there's a detriment and whether the detriment is internal or external.
Okay, so before I pass it over to Game Changer, so you can react to especially this thing about the detriment to the group and so on and so forth. There's something else too, going back to just this individual side and how it pertains to the topic in terms of how to cut people off and how selfishness aspect is related, is that I'm one of those people whom, like, objectively speaking, and by objectively mean I mean intersubjectively, you ask people who know me, they would generally say that I'm the selfish guy, right? Now, they would just say that, and I have no beef with that.
For $1, still don't have it.
You're not gonna get that dollar. People would say that I'm the selfish guy, and I recognize I recognize it. I see where it emanates from. Maybe the image that they see may be off, but I know from where it emanates, right? I'm quite aware of it. But I know also that center from which it emanates makes it very easy for me to avoid certain kinds of problems, right? Like, for example, not getting people to a point where now I got to cut them off. Or it's like, as I said, no, I see it from a mile away coming, right? So that is the way from the first person perspective of a selfish bastard, is that kind of looking at people in that kind of a way. But anyways, I'll allow, go ahead, Game Changer, comment on the whole doing harm to the group versus not doing harm to the group, attenuating yourself selfishly towards a group good in a utilitarian way, if you will. But also, if you will, on this aspect of this kind of a selfishness of which I'm an exemplar, but that does help you keep people at arm's length and handle your life in such a way that is not chaos injected by others.
Okay, no, he brings up a very good point, one that I had to think about for a moment, because I think he's talking about, like, when trying to balance the selfishness with selflessness, there is a neutral aspect where one can, pursue his or her hedonistic desires to no detriment to society at large. And yeah, I get that. I guess somebody like Hugh Hefner could be an example of this. Yes, true. What I found, however, is the way modern society is structured, and has been for quite some time, at least, through the course of human literacy, is that the neutral party can often be corrupted with someone with grander interests for a collective purpose. For example, a person who can be bought to betray the collective that he or she was born into. This is a moral dilemma that comes down to, yes, this person wants to pursue his Nero Caligula type desires. He wants to pursue these desires, and someone offers him or her a enhanced ability to do that to the detriment of his own people. So yes, it's fine to attempt to be that neutral party, okay, I'm not really hurting anybody in my selfishness. However, if given the opportunity, and they often will give you the opportunity, then you will harm somebody. Another example is, the girl with the big booty. The girl with the big booty says, "Oh, you like big booties, and you never harmed anybody in your community before. However, you can have access to this big booty if you were a drug dealer, or I want you to just go knock this guy out for looking at me funny." The proposition almost always occurs, and I think that that's when it becomes
interesting.
Yeah.
So let me see if I get the two things here, and then the doctors over there can respond. So basically, there's an idea of a certain kind of objectivity, where it's like okay, cool, okay, there needs to be objectively stated that this is a wrong mode, because if you implement the mode into a society writ large, right? If you allow this mode, it's going to lead to certain kinds of harmful outcomes, right? It'll allow for these kinds of bad things to happen, and a priori, we must say that this mode is a bad mode, right?
Yeah.
And then you give the examples of, like, because I think someone mentioned that the people whom you should worry about are people whom are hungry, but they don't have, like, in other words, like people who don't have old money or old power. It's getting somewhere, but because they can be puppets. Let's say take like a Bill Clinton. No shade against him or something, but he's a hungry guy from Arkansas, right? So people, whatever the CIA and all these other people, because you don't just go from there to be president without interests, kind of gathering you there. So people can take these kinds of people with a lot of ambition, but are generally kind of like just new, and then use them, because anyways. So the doctors, anything to say about this kind of objectivity of saying, okay, you know what, this mode of selfishness is going to lead to bad things, so therefore a priori we cannot say that it is a good way of being, which goes against, I would say, the kind of a capitalistic thing, which says, that they can be rational self-interest. Either one of you, go ahead, take it away, and then we'll start wrapping up because. Go ahead.
Yeah, first I wanted to say that I don't think that capitalism is a good apples to apples comparison. The reason is that I would actually describe capitalism as a way of harnessing greed in a more or less less destructive manner. And so in this sense, greed is categorically a bad thing, but it's being sort of the sort of momentum and energy that is spun up out of greed is being used to animate the machine, which in many ways has created a lot of has brought a lot of people out of poverty, is accelerated technology and in the development of infrastructure and all of that. Whereas what it is that I'm discussing about selfishness, in order for it to be justified, it necessarily would have to be thinking of some sort of long-term game, some long game, where the sort of hyper focus on the individual and them improving an aspect of themselves would actually potentially spin out to be positive for not just themselves, but for others also. And so that's why I see those as being not quite apples to apples. Yeah. So that's what I was saying.
Dr. Polymath, anything there on the objective, or shall we say a priori judgment of a particular mode, and also the personal thing about being taken advantage of, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with I agree in part with Game Changer on the point of okay, so we live in a society, so you can't allow every sort of behavior or you can't promote everything as if there's nothing wrong with it to a population that is filled with people who will misunderstand the nuance of the point. So if you just sort of present everything as if it's all fine, as long as you get to this very nuanced point in the middle, many people won't see that point and they will misuse that freedom, as we have right now with the emergence of feminism, for example, and equality, and how it's being misused by people. It's like so I get that whole point. So that is a pragmatic argument of actually a society at large. If you promote these very complex concepts so freely, many people misuse it and they'll cause disruptions and breakdowns. 100%. This will happen. In relation to Dr. Thunder's point about the apples to oranges thing, yeah, that's actually very interesting. In my understanding is that actually that with greed and with everything is that ultimately the human soul wants to maximize both greed and inclusion. We have genes that are satisfied with basically being acknowledged by the group as someone who is big for whatever reason. And also we want to feel as if we're better than the group. So we want both. We want to feel like we're at the top of the group, but we also want to feel like we're part of the group. So ultimately a good system would be one that is sufficient in allowing you to go up a hierarchy model, yet people at the bottom do not necessarily feel as if they're at the bottom either. Because what I've seen from experience and just reading is that systems that have low mobility and inclusion actually tend to fail far sooner and quicker and are less successful than systems which have high rates of mobility, and the equilibrium is more sort of fair to people to be able to move through it. So you need both aspects there, inclusion and also a bit of self-interest with the hierarchical structure and yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Game Changer, I'm going to give you a rejoinder and a last word, and then we're going to go last word Polymath and last word Dr. Thunder. So, rejoinder to everything that has been said. I think that you gave the objective thing about the mode and a priori judgment of it as allowing, and then someone said, well, so Dr. Thunder restated his kind of subtleties, right? And then Polymath is saying, okay, well, yeah, he agrees that it is true and these bad things will happen. But any rejoinders as to what has been said so far, and then your last words, sir?
No, I mean, I agree with what a lot that has been said. I want to Dr. Thunder, I want to point out that I don't think that it's entirely something that's limited to capitalism. I think that this is just whatever economic system a person works. If you have a number of selfish people, let's just say in a communist country, even though there's various different forms of communism, communism would work under circumstances as long as each individual laborer is working to the benefit of society. If you live under a system where you're guaranteed work and you're guaranteed pay, depending on what you do, and it's going to be equal to thy neighbor, but you work just as hard, not because you have to or because you're forced to, or because, under the fear and threat of poverty, but you're doing so because it's in the collective best interest of the nation, then you will have a prosperous nation. I think China would be an example of that, versus, a person who's like, oh, what are you going to do? Fire me? I'm not going to work in this, or I'm going to work the bare minimum not to get fired. So, it's spread throughout each economic system. If individuals work to the interest of thyself, then it's the system itself will eventually crumble. You brought up Bill Clinton as an example, who repealed Glass-Steagall. Now, that may have been in his economic best interest to do so. However, it wasn't in the nation's best interest that he did so. So, capitalism works completely if and only if the interest of the selfish individual aligns with the interests of the state. And, so you build me a railroad, I'll make you rich. You build me an internet, I'll make you rich. You provide something of extraordinary value to society, I'll make you rich. That dynamic is slowly being chipped away at here in the States. And, it's going to continue to become problematic when people can work in their own best interest without working in the interest of any collective whatsoever. So, yeah, I'm gonna just let that be my last words. And yeah.
Excellent point. Last words, K Polymath. Bring us home.
Yeah. So in relation to cutting people off and sort of selfishness and self-interest, ultimately everyone is selfish because we all want to. Most of us want to procreate, and we want it to be our genes, and we want to enjoy and basically wear our genes. We don't want to wear someone else's genes and wear hand-me-downs, right? So that selfish gene there is only bad if it's within a system that allows it to be detrimental to society. If you just build a system around it that recognizes it, but then channels that desire towards group beneficial points, I think it can work fine. But obviously, if you have a detrimental, let's say, in response to the whole communism thing, is that many communist systems failed because there were selfish elites who did not, who actually absconding the money. Many capitalistic systems don't do so well for the same reason. This is why most successful capitalist systems are a social democracy, more or less. Every capitalistic system that is functional and works and is effective has a benefit system for its population. So ultimately, if you don't give the small ant its due and just eat every meal by yourself as the big ant, the small ant's going to revolt, and it's just time before they come for you.
So now it's an ant. It's a rat. It's a dog. It's Dr. Thunder arm wrestling his kid. Now it's an ant. This the age-old analogy keeps coming back over and over and over again.
Well, that was the original analogy to ant. The collective analogy.
Pardon me?
I said that was the original. I think he was talking about the original analogy I used when I was talking about collective.
Oh, gotcha. I thought that he was talking about the little ant, big ant thing. Well, anyways, yes. Some of us like to procreate. Some of us like to get PhDs in England and then fly over on a cheap flight to Somalia for peace leave. But anyways, Dr. Thunder, the cheap flight, the cheap flight. I know how you guys roll over there. Anyway, Dr. Thunder, what you got for us?
I am the big ant. But anyhow, I think I'll use this as an opportunity. It was great to have Dr. Polymath and Game Changer on the panel today. Thank you for your contributions. And of course, I would agree with what you were saying, Game Changer, about the greed thing. I happen to believe that capitalism has probably been shown to be the best way to do it, or it seems to have had the least amount of negatives. But yeah, greed can be used to. It doesn't have to be capitalism. And we're getting ish done, and this has been the second part on this pretty new series, which started last week. Remember to come and check us out on Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and come and join the conversation. We always appreciate the super chats and the active chat and the great folks that we have listening. So thank you very much. I am going to be continuing my Conversations with Dr. Thunder interview series starting at the end of August, and I have a quite I've got a great list of folks, and I'm really looking forward to that. And then next week I'm sorry, not next week. Tomorrow, I'm going to be on Larry Sharp's show, The Sharp Way. So if you get a chance, it's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for that show tomorrow. And yeah, so great. But come back and see us, Ike and I, on Getting Ish Done next week on Tuesday. Thank you very, very much.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everyone in the panel. Thank you for those in the chat, the super chatters, and so on and so forth. Yes. We covered it all, from cutting people off all the way through to geopolitical discussions about capitalism and the nexus of morality and so on and so forth. And the fact that we do want to be on top of the group, but at the same time, we want the group to bestow a certain kind of it's the whole slave and master thing going on with Hegel. Yeah, I just started another stream, but no, that will not happen. I will go ahead and cut us off now. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, we are out. Huh. I clicked it.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what was behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.